Today on Till We Make It, I've got everything you need to know about this career milestone. You've been booked somewhere, and for the first time ever, you are being flown there. I'm Mike Quackenbush. This is Till We Make It. And no matter where you're at on your journey as a professional wrestler, sooner or later, I'm going to get to something right here on this channel that's just for you. Today, I'm breaking open a big milestone in the career of a performing wrestler. It's when you get booked somewhere, and that booking comes with a plane ticket. You're about to head to the airport for the very first time to go to work. Before you even leave your house, you may have the opportunity to check in for your flight online. And this will be based on which airline you happen to be booked on. So I'm hoping that the promoter that hired you has already sent you that itinerary, and you know exactly which airline you're on. You've got the confirmation code or itinerary number, so you could look it all up online if you wanted to. And looking at their website is also valuable because it is there where you may have the opportunity to check in advance. Checking in advance for your flight is going to give you a major leg up on everybody else that only checks in the day of the flight. And you might be able to do it on that airline's website or by using their mobile app. You might be thinking to yourself, Mike, why on earth would I check in advance for my flight when I'm going to the airport tomorrow anyway? Well, here's why. Everyone on your flight has the opportunity to check in advance 24 hours before the flight departs. And if you want the first crack at all that precious overhead storage space in the plane, you want to be in one of the first groups allowed to board the craft. How can you accomplish that? One of two ways. You can check in early, like on that airline's website or through their mobile app, or once you get to the airport and you're using one of the self-serve kiosks, you can pay money to get moved up into a better boarding group. And some airlines charge as much as $150 to move you up in that line. So if the options you are confronted with are you could check in the night before or wait until you get to the kiosk and pay anywhere between $39 and $150 to get moved up in terms of boarding priority, I feel like you might want to do the website thing. That's where it's at. Save that money. So you've already checked in for the flight. You did it the night before. Way to go. Now it's time for you to go to the airport. The trick is, when? If you're flying somewhere domestic, you need to be at the airport checked in at least 1 hour before your flight. If you're flying to an international destination, 2 hours is the guideline. There are no countries on Earth currently that require you to show up more than 2 hours early for an international flight. And if you need more info on international travel, I've already made you a video, and it's linked above. Most airports you will find are accessible by public transportation, and even when that's not the case, you could of course take an Uber or a Lyft, or you might be able to find a car service that you can hire or a taxi that's going to take you there. But if you're taking your own vehicle to the airport, be advised. As you get closer to the airport, you're going to start to see a variety of parking options, and where you park is important to how much you're gonna pay. Here are 3 kinds of parking you need to know about. Number 1 is short-term parking. This will be closest to the terminal, and it's also the most expensive. Most airports will not allow you to stay in short-term parking over 24 hours. If you do, you may come back to discover your vehicle has been towed away. And the second kind is the regular airport parking that you'll probably see signs everywhere for. Most airports charge about $20 a day to park your vehicle there, which, if you're going to be gone for a week or two or some overseas tour that lasts 3 to 5 weeks, think about how much you're going to be paying when you get back. And that third option, when you have no choice but to leave your vehicle at the airport for an extended period of time, it's worth your while to turn up a half hour early and locate the economy parking. You may not see signs for economy parking at the airport, but you're going to see billboards as you get close, because these are third-party lots located near the airport but not immediately adjacent to the airport. And these services will offer you a shuttle that will take you from their remote lot right to the terminal. When you return, in some cases, you may need to call that service for them to come and pick you up at baggage claim and take you back to where your vehicle has been parked. Others run continuous shuttle service through the airport terminals, and you just need to wait right underneath the corresponding sign that says parking shuttles, and eventually you'll recognize the one coming for you. It looks like the one that dropped you off. That'll be the tip-off. So, you checked in advance. Now you've parked your vehicle and you're actually in the terminal. Are you stressed yet? Don't worry, I'm going to walk you through this every step of the way. The next thing you're going to do is go up to one of the self-serve kiosks, which are increasingly popular in this day and age because it is so expensive for the airlines to staff their service desks with human beings. You know one day that's going to be robots, but right now it's self-serve kiosks, and you might be on your own navigating that system from the moment that you show up. So make sure that you select the correct language for you. Most of them will ask you to indicate if you are active military or not because there are special privileges and preferences extended to military. So choose accordingly based on your status of service. And then you are going to have to show some form of ID. You may have to scan your passport, you may have to put your driver's license face down on the kiosk for it to be read, or you may insert a credit card that will read your name and personal information, especially if you've got one that corresponds to the airline on which you're traveling. In my case, for example, my frequent flyer miles are through American Airlines. So if I'm flying through American or one of their partners, I always want to make sure I swipe that credit card so it instantly calls up my miles program. I'm going to take this moment now to let you know American Airlines hasn't sponsored this video. And even if they tried to pay me for it, I don't know that I would endorse them to you. Look out. When you're at the self-serve kiosk, there's going to be a bunch of options presented to you and a bunch of questions you've got to answer about the items that you're carrying. This may come as a shock to you if you've never traveled before, but you can't bring a gun on the flight. You can't bring a knife on the flight. They're not going to let you walk that hand grenade on the flight. I don't know why you're bringing those anyway. These are items that are prohibited, and if you need an advance warning so that you're not throwing your hand grenade in the recycling bin at the airport, just jump on any airline's website. They all have full listings of what the government-mandated prohibited items are, so you don't make the mistake of showing up with something that means something to you and having to discard it before you're allowed to board. Also at the kiosks are when you're going to be given the opportunity to upgrade certain things. Do you want to be moved into first class if you're seated in coach? It will tell you exactly what price is associated with making that upgrade. On the last flight I traveled on, for whatever reason, the upgrade from coach to first class was over $4,000. And when that came up, Mike picked no. That's what I picked. So aside from some fun and otherwise absurd options that you may be presented at the kiosk, there is a mission-critical option that's going to pop up before you're done. It will ask you if you want to change your seat. And if your flight is not sold out, there is a possibility that you could move seats. For example, you're sat on the aisle, but you would be more comfortable on a window seat. Or you're in the center, but you would rather be on the aisle where you can stretch that leg out on occasion, only to be ambushed by the drink cart as it comes down the aisle. Whatever your preference might be, if there are availabilities, there's a screen there where you can change seats, and it will advise you if there is any fee associated with moving to a different seat. That's especially relevant in the rows where there is a little more leg room. You can be sure the airlines charge a premium to sit there. As you're making your way through all the prompts at the self-serve kiosk, eventually it's going to ask you, how many bags are you carrying, and are there any you want to check? And what does it mean if you have to check a bag? Well, you might have a piece of luggage which is too big or too heavy to be carried onto the plane. And usually, near the kiosk, there is a simple setup where you can measure your bag. They might even have an empty frame that you can insert your bag into to see if it fits. And that will tell you whether or not it's eligible as a carry-on. If it's not, or it weighs a certain amount, you may have no choice but to check your bag. And you'll get a printed tag that comes out of the kiosk that you yourself might apply to the bag, and then you'll get in a separate line where you see other people handing over their tag bags so that it goes underneath the plane but still goes with you to your journey. An important pro tip for you here. When the kiosk prints out your tag, double check that the airport codes on that tag match the airport where you are going. When you check a bag for a domestic flight, almost all airlines will charge you a fee between $25 and $50 for that checked bag, unless you're part of one of their preferred flyer programs, like a frequent flyer program. Be ready to pay that fee at the kiosk. That's exactly why you want to have a credit card at the ready. If it's already been swiped, chances are it will recognize that card and you can charge away. You don't want to attempt to pay with check. You don't want to attempt to pay with cash. That means you've got to go to a separate window and wait in line for that all to happen. Your best bet is to put it on the credit card that you've already swiped. Currently, checked bags for flights boarding in the United States, no matter where they are going, have a weight limit of 50 pounds. And if you go over that weight limit, expect to be assessed a fee between $80 and $200 based on what the airline is. You do have the option, though, to try and remove those extra pounds from the bag so that it makes that 50-pound weight limit. And where do those items go? Chances are they're going in your pockets or into your carry-on bag. And yes, they still end up on the plane. So that total weight is still going to go to your destination. It's just not going to be in the bag that goes underneath the aircraft. If you are wondering how many bags you have to check for the flight that you are going on, bear in mind this simple guideline. When boarding a flight, you are allowed one carry-on and one personal item. And that personal item is really subject to some leeway. So that personal item might be a jacket, but it might be a purse, it might be a handbag, it might be a garment bag with your suit in it, or it might be your fanny pack, brother. Everything other than that one personal item and your carry-on needs to be checked. And yes, you can expect those fees to get bigger and bigger the more bags that you check. Some airlines will not allow you to bring more than 3 checked items. A quick side note, if you are bringing some kind of specialty item, like a wheelchair, a stroller, a bag of golf clubs, you might want to reach out to the airline in advance. Some do make allowances for these items, while others do not, and you could get stuck paying an exorbitant fee if you're bringing an odd-shaped item with you on the flight, even if it's an absolute necessity. All right, so it's time we get down to work. The checked bag has been whisked away on that conveyor belt to who knows where, and now it is time for you to attempt to deal with the TSA and navigate security at the airport. So here's some things you need to know up front, and there's a lot of things you need to know about getting through security in a post-9/11 world. Number 1, get ready to take off your shoes, potentially your belt, and any outerwear you have on like a winter coat, hat, or scarf before you're allowed to pass through security. You're also going to take that carry-on bag of yours and that personal item of yours, and they're going to pass through a metal detector, most likely on a conveyor belt. So you will be separated from your items for a little bit while you pass through the metal detector. And you need to know this about what can and cannot be in your carry-on. The TSA will limit the number of liquids, gels, creams, and aerosols you are allowed to carry onto a plane, like that bottle of water that you're carrying with you. You're going to have to empty it out. You can carry the empty vessel through security and fill it back up on the other side, but you're not walking through with a bottle of water or any other liquid that is over 3.4 ounces. And yes, that's even going to include simple toiletries that you've got packed in your carry-on bag. They've got to be 3.4 ounces or less in size, and you've got to put them all in a clear plastic bag. When the time comes for you to go through the metal detector, you will take that clear plastic bag out of your carry-on and put it in a separate bin by itself. Failure to do so, I have seen this happen myself, can allow the TSA to take all of those items and throw them away despite all your teary-eyed protests. And while we all happen to think of things like this as being, well, those are liquid, right? Well, what about toothpaste? This is considered a gel, so this too needs to conform to TSA regulations and be less than 3.4 ounces. Luckily, most stores have travel size sections where you can find these items in the correct sizes to pass through the TSA without any trouble. And if you're struggling to find some of the basics, I'll list links to them down below. So you took out all your liquids and your gels and your creams and your aerosols in that plastic bag and you sent it through. You're also going to have to take out any game consoles, laptops, or anything that is iPad size or bigger out of your bag and send that through on a tray of its own. And you took off your shoes and maybe your belt and all of your outerwear and you sent that through on the conveyor belt. And then finally, you are allowed to walk through the metal detector for just a few seconds so they can see what you're concealing. Be prepared for the fact that non-seasoned flyers tend to make all kinds of rookie mistakes at this stage of the game, like they left their watch on, they left something in their pocket that was metallic that sets it off, and the line's gonna snag, and you're gonna wait while they send them back through the metal detector, unload themselves, and then go back through for one more pass. There are very few airports left in the world that do not have security measures of this kind, especially metal detectors. And airports that do not, you will discover, are not serviced by the major airlines. So they have simply cut them out of their travel schedule because of the security risk that they pose. And though here in the US of A, our first line of defense when it comes to airport security are the TSA agents, when you go to other countries, don't be shocked to see military personnel there with outrageously sized weapons, all there to make sure that you and I stay safe. One last note about our friends at the TSA. Since September 11th, there has certainly been a lack of appreciation for a wild sense of humor when it comes to airport security. And this is not the time for you to try out your dry, sarcastic remarks with members of the TSA, because anything that sounds vaguely unusual or even somewhat like a threat is going to land you in a whole heap of trouble. So you finally made it through security, and you're going to reclaim all of your things on the other side of that metal detector, making sure you pick up that carry-on bag and that personal item of yours, and then retrieve anything else that you had to put in a separate tray. There's your PS4, and there's your belt, and there's your hat. Make sure you collect all of those things, and then you want to clear that area as fast as possible, because the security area is always the biggest bottleneck at any airport. Even if you need to put your own shoes back on, find a place even a couple yards away so that you can get clear of that security area before reassembling yourself and finding out where your gate is. If this is indeed your first time flying ever, not just for pro wrestling, but ever, there is an intimidating bank of screens you're going to come across that is most typically situated right after the security station. And this will list all the incoming and outgoing flights for that airport. Somewhere on there is your flight, but all the information that you need is probably already on the boarding pass that the kiosk provided you with when you finished checking in. However, if your gate should change, your flight is delayed, or in any other way the status of your flight is affected, it's going to appear on those screens first. So learning how to read those screens is a valuable travel skill. So what kind of information could you expect to see on these airport screens? Well, things like this: your flight number, the destination city, in most cases the airline that is servicing it, and in that final column you might see yes or no listed, which answers the question, is your flight on time? If it's been delayed or canceled, you're going to find that information in that last column. If you get past the security terminal and are deeper into the airport, don't worry. Most airports other than LAX have multiple screens set up, easy for you to find in convenient locations. And if you scan it very quickly and start to freak out because your flight isn't listed there, there's one of two things I'd like to advise you of. Number one, make sure you're looking at departing flights, not arriving flights. Because of course, if you are flying out, it's going to be on the departure side of the screen. Number two, in the case of heavily trafficked international airports, sometimes the flights are not listed on the screen more than 30 minutes before the boarding begins. So if you turned up 5 hours early for your flight to Istanbul, it may not be on the screens just yet. I want to forewarn you of this phenomenon at gigantic airports, like the one in Orlando, Florida, or London Heathrow. Sometimes the gates are located so far apart from the rest of the terminal that you might be provided with some transportation to get to where you're going. This could include a shuttle bus or a monorail that will transport you to the other parts of the airport where you need to go that would otherwise be too far to walk. If you are in one of these bigger airports, you will find a clue as to where your gate is on your boarding pass. If your gate is B23, chances are that means your gate is in the B terminal. If your ticket says that you are boarding at gate F8, chances are that gate is going to be in the F terminal. And there'll be maps virtually everywhere telling you where to go and making sure that you can find the terminal with relative ease. I'm exhausted already. Are you exhausted? And we haven't even gotten on the plane yet. All we've done is get to the gate, and now you gotta wait for your flight to board. So what are you gonna do to fill all this time? A couple things. One, you're going to see a bunch of gift shops around. If you wonder what a duty-free shop is, that is a place where you can purchase items free of sales tax. That's the duty that you are free of. And if you emptied out a water bottle in advance, this is a great time to go find a filling station around the airport to fill yours back up so you've got it at the ready on the flight. Because most domestic flights will provide you with little else other than a small complimentary beverage and some snack, which tends to be a bunch of empty carbs like a bag of pretzels or some small cookie, for the entire duration of the flight. And if you want something more or healthier, you're going to pay for it. In the seat back pocket, chances are there will be a menu there of items that you can charge, and I say it that way because most flight attendants do not carry cash. And if you want to transact up in the air, you got to have your credit or debit card ready to go. So you made it through security, and you put all your stuff back on, and you got your snacks, you fill up your water bottle, and they're finally ready for you to board the flight. Oh my gosh, it's actually happening. Avoid this. Do not be that person that all of a sudden decides they're going to try and block everybody else's access to the boarding lane. Just wait. Just wait. If you look at your boarding pass, it'll tell you with which group you are allowed to board. And if you're in boarding group 15, guess what? You should just go sit down for a while. Just go and sit down. Don't be the person that clogs up the boarding lane. We all hate that person. Don't be that person. A somewhat silly note about boarding. I find it silly. You're going to find it silly as soon as I explain it to you. Some airlines actually separate, like with a thin velvet rope, the lane where preferred customers get to board from where the dirty general public gets to board. So unless you are double diamond frequent flyer or whatever other absurd designation they happen to give to their preferred flyers, you may have to be about 6 inches to the right and you will board through that lane. These are usually clearly marked, and if you get it wrong, don't worry, somebody's going to point it out to you. So when your group is called, you're going to make your way through that boarding lane, and then you're going to show your boarding pass to the airline representative who is there, who will scan it, and as long as that comes up green, you're on your way down the jetway and onto the plane. And you might have to show that boarding pass again to someone just inside the plane who will direct you to roughly where your seat is. If you and I have ever talked about air travel before, then you know that I referred to the airport as a cauldron of misbehavior. And I phrase it that way for this reason. There is something about air travel that gives certain personality types a license to misbehave or otherwise behave in a way that we would never find acceptable anywhere else on Earth except in the airport. And if you want to know where people run afoul of this, most often it's at this moment, when they are getting on the plane and the mad scramble begins for the overhead storage bins. Pro tip coming at you right now about those overhead storage lockers. You want to put your bag in the same section where you are ticketed. So if you're sat in first class, you want to try and put your bags in the overhead bins in first class. What if you're flying Economy Plus? Well, then in the Economy Plus section of the plane, you want to put your bags in one of those bins. The same is true if you're flying coach. But don't feel like you have to wait exactly to be lined up with the row where you are sat. If you are in the section where you are ticketed, go ahead, throw your bags up there. And remember that personal item you walked on with, it might be best to try and keep that with you, or put it under the seat in front of you, tucked all the way underneath the seat before takeoff. And one other pro tip about that boarding process, if there's something you're going to need to be comfortable on the flight, remove it from your carry-on bag before you store it in that overhead locker, especially essential medications that you might need to take during the duration of the flight. Remove them from your bag and keep them on your person so that you have easy access to them when the flight is in motion. There are times up in the air where the seatbelt sign will be illuminated and you cannot stand up or access the overhead lockers. And if you need to have medicine at the ready, keep it on your person. The more times you fly, the more you're going to discover this. Some airlines have a great method for having people board the airplane, and others seem to be very chaotic and somewhat haphazard. Now, I don't doubt that somewhere, some corporate master came up with a methodology for why they board the plane like that. But to the people like you and me, it doesn't make a lick of sense. However, we have the chance to take the bull by the reins when we land at our destination and it's time to deplane. Before deplaning can even begin, your craft has got to have a jetway attached to it or some other mechanism that connects it directly to the terminal. So even though you are on the ground, it may not be safe yet for all of the passengers to deplane. You will know when it is time for you to deplane because the seatbelt sign will be turned off and all of a sudden everyone around you is going to stand up and start acting like a wild beast. And I want you to know, if you follow this simple guideline for deplaning, you will be much happier, I will be much happier, and Colt Cabana will be much happier because there must be a method to this madness. And here's what I'm proposing to you, world. The first row gets out first. And then the second row gets out second. And then the third row gets out third. Somebody from row 39 is not going to go rogue, sprint up the aisleway, and imagine that they're going to beat everybody else out off of the plane. With this exception, if someone were to come on the in-house PA system and ask for everyone to remain seated because there is an extenuating circumstance like a medical emergency is happening on the plane, or someone is in danger of missing their connection and the airline knows which passenger that is, these are the only times when someone who might be in the rear of the craft is allowed to exit first. Under any other conditions, use common sense. The first row goes first, and the second row goes second, and the third row goes, not you, row 39, the third row goes third, and so on and so forth. And once you've actually deplaned, you might think that tendency for misbehavior is finally over, but my friend, you would be mistaken, because you have yet to go and claim your checked bag. As you deplane, no doubt you will notice all the passengers moving in herd-like fashion and start looking for signs that say baggage or luggage. Follow them to the carousels where the bags eventually come off. Keeping in mind, you may wait, sometimes an inordinate amount of time, for your bag to appear. I can certainly think of flights I've been on where I have waited close to an hour for my bag to show up on that carousel so that I could finally leave the airport. In airports with very good security, you might be asked to show your boarding pass or a luggage tag that matches what is on your bag so that they can ensure no one's bag is being stolen. But then there is that very curious other circumstance where you are waiting so patiently at the baggage carousel and all the other bags come and go and you still don't see your prized possession, and then they start turning out the lights and the carousel turns off and you realize your bag has been lost. So your baggage has been lost. Is this reason to fret? Absolutely. But all hope is not lost, my friend. Here's what you're going to do. You're going to find the customer service area for the airline that you are traveling with and get ready to present to them your identification, the boarding pass, and the claim tag that was given to you at the kiosk when that bag tag was printed out. They may be able to scan their system and find out exactly where your bag is. And most airlines feel an obligation to you, the customer, to get that bag to you within 24 hours. This means, in a lot of cases, they will bring it to the hotel where you are staying or right to your house to make sure that you get that bag in a timely fashion. There are some airlines which will even compensate you if they can't do it within a 24-hour window. Since I started my journey back in 1994, my bags have been lost more than a dozen times by major airlines, on domestic flights and on international flights, and I have never waited more than 48 hours for my bag to be returned to me, usually by a very helpful airline representative who is extremely apologetic for the inconvenience that you have suffered. There is one other circumstance that we need to consider as well. What if your bag shows up damaged? Well, similarly, if your bag has been damaged in transit, find that customer service area. Most airlines will not compensate you in any way for what they consider to be routine damage, which is to be expected during air travel. But if the damage to your bag is egregious, you might be able to file a claim, and in some cases, they will provide you with brand new luggage. In all my years of air travel, I've only ever had a piece of luggage replaced for me once by an airline, and that's because my bag appeared to have been sat on by Haystacks Calhoun. 9 times out of 10, filing those damage reports with the airline are just a waste of time. The baggage carousel area is typically where I get met by someone who's been dispatched from the wrestling organization that hired me so they can pick me up and get me to the venue so I'm able to perform. You might be responsible for your own transportation. If so, connections to things like trains and buses, and also a waiting bay of taxicabs is often there. But be cautious of this. Nowhere I have ever traveled is it legal for a driver to come into the airport itself asking for business. Like, hey, I can take you where you need to go. Do you need a ride? Jump in with me. Let me help you with those bags. I'll put you in my car and help you get where you're trying to go. This is illegal, as I said, everywhere I have ever traveled. And the people trying to do this are looking to put one over on you. So you found your driver, or you jumped on the train, you found yourself a taxi cab, and you're on your way to the venue. You are performing. This is a major milestone. You survived the cauldron of misbehavior and have leveled up your game in your journey as a professional wrestler. Do you know that you can't drink the water in the airplane bathroom? It's not potable most of the time. Like, it's gross. You should not brush your teeth with it or drink it or anything. It's disgusting. Everything about airplane bathrooms actually is pretty disgusting, but especially the water. Don't drink the water.